Hey, this is Mo Lunsford at Union Grove Lumber Studios.
And this is the Shed Geek. We want to welcome you to today's episode.
This is Susan Frere, the Shed Gal, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Shed Geek podcast. I have the absolute pleasure today of having on my call Warren Marshall. He is the marketing manager of an incredible company called Barn Pros, which is located in Monroe, Washington. Now, welcome, Warren. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat today.
Yes. And full disclosure, I'm a little partial. Monroe, Washington is where I was born and raised. I actually had tried to get Warren when I was up in Washington a couple weeks ago, onto a, in-person podcast, but he's a very busy guy. They have a really busy operation and it just didn't work. So here we are and glad to have you. I'd like to start out by, tell me a little bit about you. How did you get to working for Barn Pros? A little bit of people like to know you.
Sure. Well, like you, from the greater Seattle area over the east side and the suburbs and stuff like that. And so I actually have a pretty cool connection to Barn Pros as a company, just because I've known most of the at least current employees here now for the good majority of my life. Actually, it's a very family-oriented business, and I was lucky enough to grow up with some of the families that were, either part of the founding members or, very early on joining the company. So I kind of was introduced to it through just some of my personal connections and friendships, and then had the opportunity to kind of get my foot in the door and end up being part of Barn Pros full time.
So you grew up on East Side, very family oriented business. You kind of you knew the folks that own Barn Pros. How long have you been with Barn Pros?
I've been with Barn Pros since 2019, so about 5-ish years now.
Very nice. And did you start out in the marketing department or did you start in another role?
Technically, I started out in another role. I was brought on board just through, I have a background in photography, filmmaking, and was doing some of my own marketing things before I actually joined Barn Pros full time. So I started helping out the people here just by going out and shooting photos and videos of, our clients, the local building process, just kind of, a lot of the different elements that go into visual marketing and a little bit of website design and back end work there. And I did that a little off and on for a couple, well, not really off and on. I guess I did that pretty consistently for a couple of years. And sort of just by the natural progression of, so much of media production ends up feeding marketing efforts. So, we are a big company, but a small, relative to our size of business, I would suppose you would say we're a small group of actual individual people, number of employees. So there's a lot of, people helping out others in different departments, and, we all work very closely together. So I ended up kind of just dabbling my toes in more of the actual marketing behind the company, just, through the nature of the media I was helping produce and stuff. And so that kind of just, snowballed from one thing into the other. And then eventually I took on more of a full-time higher up capacity with overseeing not just the media side of the marketing efforts, but really everything that entails.
Wonderful. I love that. How long has Barn Pros been in business?
Barn Pros has been in business, I believe, since 1988. I'm a little fuzzy on the details of when the actual, maybe paperwork was filed, but I know that our two founders, essentially started the core of the business in the late 80s. And then I think the actual Barn Pros brand and name was established maybe around 1990, 91, somewhere around there. But like I mentioned, the kind of the core of the company was started a few years prior to what landed on paper.
So they have some history. Have they always been in Monroe?
We've always been based out of Monroe, yes.
Okay, gotcha. Because the name, to me, I mean, it's well known down driving through the Frylands, and but I didn't realize the extent of not only what you do, but your reach in doing it. So it's really neat to, it sounds like a couple of business partners started it out. Well, do you know what their vision was when they started the business? Because I think a lot of our listeners are in the shed industry, in the metal building industry, pole barn. We have a very diverse audience, but there's someone out there that's going to say, maybe I could do this. And they're not wrong. What was their vision when they started out originally?
Yeah, so it's interesting. As far as just the original sort of founding of the company and the story, it sort of goes like our two builders met, or sorry, excuse me, our two founders met because they were both local builders in the area, and just through the nature of a tight community, especially back then when the greater Seattle area has obviously seen a lot of growth in the 35 years or so that we've existed. But they connected just through kind of being small town builders and whatnot, and then as they started building together, they were mostly doing just custom homes actually when they first started, and then we founded, like you mentioned, we were founded in kind of the Monroe, Duval, greater Seattle area. And for those not familiar with our area, it actually does get pretty rural very quickly around here. As soon as you leave, the western side of Lake Washington, go over to the east side, our Bellevue, Redmond, Woodinville, Snohomish properties, they get pretty rural pretty fast. So through building custom homes around that area, they got asked, well, hey, you built my house. I'm interested in something for my horses. Would you be interested in building a barn for us as well? And they got a couple of those and honestly just really fell in love with not only that building process, but that community, right? Some of our founders, while they start off as builders, they actually have backgrounds in equestrian roots as well. One of our founders was a professional farrier for a while. His wife was a horse trainer. And so they have roots in both the building side and the equestrian community side. So as they started to get a little more of the requests for building barns, as I mentioned, they just really fell in love with that process and that community. And so I think it's going back to your question of what the vision was. I can't speak to the entirety of that for them, but the way that I've heard the story told many times is as they developed kind of more consistent business for the barn side of building, they just wanted to grow enough to be able to meet that demand that they were receiving, right? So we started out I should say, started out with a couple of what would become the models or the structured packages and kits that we're known for these days, because they were building similar things. A lot of the equestrian community at the end of the day has very similar needs as far as the aesthetic preferences and the functionality that's needed to house safely and sustainably their animals. And so they just started kind of noticing the patterns of not only what the clients needed, but also what made these a very buildable product at the end of the day. And so that just kind of snowballed over the years into doing a lot more building locally. And then to maybe jump forward a little bit ahead of your question, but to bring us a little more to what really led Barn Pros to take off and become a nationwide brand is they got involved early on with the startup of, or the early, they were very early adopters of Google Ads and, having more of a website presence around the turn of the early 2000s era. And then I'm jumping around a little bit on the timeline of this, but just trying to piece
I am so glad you brought that in because that is amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of a part of really what speaks to the question of the vision they had. Really, the way that it transpired, like I mentioned, is they were early adopters of things like embracing the internet and Google Ads and just local word of mouth. And then our business ended up just by proximity, right, being in the greater Seattle area, really growing in tandem as other big successful companies really took off, like Microsoft and people who are in this area and find themselves really interested in kind of their horse hobbies or their horse lifestyle and stuff like that. So we were able to really grow in tandem with some of the other successful businesses that we find ourselves being neighbors to. And so again, maybe jumping ahead of your question a little bit, but bringing it to where we are not only now, but how we got to be more of a nationwide brand is once we had a good word of mouth, we built a lot of barns around this area, and then we had a pretty healthy web presence. Again, being early adopters, especially at that time, we were getting requests from people all over the country. And so that was the opportunity that our founders saw as far as them really having the building experience, and then paired with, like I mentioned, the familiarity with the equestrian clientele and the needs and wants of those people
Yes.
are, and really what makes a really successful barn, not just something that's pretty and can house your horses, but all of the little things that you don't think about unless you've done this dozens and dozens and dozens of times, right? Thinking of the needs of the people, the builders, and the animals kind of all in one. We really found a way to bring that all together into the barn pros that now and can see through the models and structures that we sell. So really what happened is they started
That's
getting
an
requests from
incredible
people.
story.
Yeah, we started getting requests from people all over the country, of like, hey, we love this. Can you come build for us? And when I say all over the country, I mean, I think the very first out of state, out of Washington barn that was sold, I believe it was somewhere way back in New England, like New York or New Hampshire or one of those states up there. So really that going back to your original question of the vision, I think that's where an opportunity really presented itself to our original founders of we have the experience of building these things efficiently and successfully. And so there's an opportunity for us to be able to work with builders out of state that are not technically, Barn Pros employees, but we're helping serve our Barn Pros clients still by offering the models of barns that we do in a deliverable. We actually really don't like saying building package because it's what we offer is so much more than a material drop, if you will, right? Because we go so deep with each of our clients into really figuring out what their needs and wants are, as well as what's going to work best for their locations and the number of animals they have. So it's much more than just a material drop, but we found a way to bring our success out of state at a larger scale.
Incredible. And I probably should have done this at the beginning, but I'm going to do it now because it seems like a good time. To sum up, what is this? What, not in 10 minutes, but in a minute or two, what's your elevator pitch? What do you guys do? So if someone says, what's Barn Pros, and they don't want to go to their computer, tell me what you do.
Yeah, so we have kind of three main areas of clientele that we serve these days, or sorry, I kind of said that. I'm answering that a little sideways. So Barn Pros is a company that sells high-end timber frame structures that are meant to be very buildable for, the average general contractor. It's more than just a handyman. It is quite a project, but we sell high-end timber frame structures for equestrian needs, and really beyond that these days, because so many of what we see our clients doing with our barns these days is, they're very beautiful, they're very beautiful, very well designed structures, very durable, have a very classic look. And we kind of offer three main different genres of structure, if you will. We have over, I think, 30 models these days. And we kind of have our three main genres, at least as we start to, bucket them from the initial glance of just your traditional barn, you're at your agricultural barn, your equestrian barn. We have living models because that's become a very popular demand that we saw over the years. And we were also very early adopters of that. The kind of the barn dominium has been quite a trend in recent years, but really even beyond, what people were seeing on Pinterest these days. This goes back a number of years that predates obviously social media and is something that was very interested in very early on. So living models is something that we see a lot of which is actually probably what we sell the most of these days. Kind of our flagship model is called the Denali, and it's basically a barn apartment or a barn home above any number of stalls or open garage space or really whatever you want to configure it as, within maybe a few parameters, but generally speaking, that's kind of the main sense of what it is. And then along with your ag barns or your horse barns and your living spaces, we also kind of have more of a genre that's more shop related, kind of single story, but very big, very open barn inspired structures.
Yes, I think that's great. And I'll tell you, viewers, if you want some inspiration on a beautiful website and the content, barnpros.com should be your go-to. It's a spectacular website. The content's incredible. It's easy on the eyes. Apparently, their marketing manager is doing a mighty fine job
Thank you.
because it truly is beautiful. I am so glad you brought up. Here's what I thought. Okay, it's a couple of partners. I didn't know before right now how they started. It's a couple of partners. They just grew organically, and then word of mouth. That's not what happened. I mean, it did to some extent, but what you said was it really took off. It really blew up when we were a leader by having a website and by um, utilizing Google when no one else was using it. I want to talk about that. Did these folks that founded this building, did they have business degrees, or were they boots on the ground people building houses?
It's really the best of both worlds. I would say one of our founders comes from probably more of the traditional building background. Very, very hands-on, very, very smart, obviously. But the other business owner did come from, I would say, a little bit more from my understanding of a business background. It specifically came from finance and was just really familiar with kind of more of the corporate world and corporate community rather than just the business side of things, but had a pretty diverse background and stuff. And then he himself is a very competent builder as well. And so it kind of was just the best of both worlds coming together.
Wow. And only they could answer that. It makes me wonder. I mean, we don't know what we don't know, obviously, but I'll bet when they first started out, yeah, they're building houses. Then they get started and get requests for, hey, I also need this barn. I'll bet they really had no idea of what this could be, but at a certain point, they did. I mean, because I mean, you guys are in a, huge, huge presence in the market, and so I'm always curious about that. And I want to excuse everybody. I just got done coming back from a week of taping a TV show, and so my voice is already crazy normally, but it's really crazy today. So listeners, my apologies. Um, 21 hours of sleep over 6 days taping an entrepreneurship boot camp TV show. It is not for the faint of heart.
Oof,
So
no
that'll
doubt.
be coming out. That'll be coming out soon, and of course I'll be publicizing that. You won't want to miss it. It's a fantastic opportunity that I had. So do pardon my voice. The forward thinking, the Google ads, the doing things differently. I want to talk about that. And I had no idea when we started where this conversation will go, and I don't know where it'll end. But I am a huge proponent in the shed industry for we have to do things differently, or the metal, and the same for the metal building industry, because those industries, and no harm meant to anyone, they are behind the times, and I don't think there's anyone in the industry that doesn't know that. It's just they don't know how to change it. What do you think sets those apart? Like, have they not taken the opportunity to do Google and to have the website? The impact that, as far as growth on the company, probably would have been much different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things where you could probably paint a million different scenarios, and it's just guesswork at the end of the day, trying to think about what could have been in other directions. But I very much agree with your point of, I think people that end up finding great success, and it should probably be stated that it's very industry location dependent and stuff. There's nothing wrong with the word of mouth is always going to be your
Yeah.
best and most probably cherished. You can't put a price on word of mouth and just a good community, human to human relationship, human to human relationship, as far as what that does for not just everybody finding success in their business, but really people on both ends having a better experience at the end of the day. But to your point of what would things have looked like if they hadn't been early adopters of Google? That's a great question. I think anybody could sort of, anybody's best guess, because it is, like I mentioned, a huge part of our story, and that having an early presence on the internet with our website, and specifically Google Ads, expanding our reach and discoverability. I don't know how or if or to what extent we ever would have started getting the requests to, bring our products and expand our clientele to places outside of just, Washington, Oregon, maybe the Northwest.
Have you been considering adding a line of greenhouses to your brand? At Cold Spring Enterprises, we have the perfect solution for you. By incorporating greenhouse products into your sales location, whether you're a do-it-yourself dealer or a manufacturer supporting multiple shed lots, you can expand your customer base. We offer easy-to-assemble greenhouse kits that will simplify the process of adding greenhouses to your lot. You can choose between two basic styles, an economy style and an A-frame style. We can ship a standard 8x12 greenhouse kit directly to your shed lot or manufacturing location. These kits include all the necessary components for assembly, except for the wainscoting or clear panels, door, and fan. However, we can assist you in connecting with the supplier for these items. Moreover, we also offer negotiable bulk pricing for multiple units. To help you get started, we are pleased to offer an exclusive discount through the Shed Geek podcast. You can receive an 8x12 economy or A-frame style greenhouse, complete with wainscoting or clear panels, a screen door, and fan. The pricing for a complete one-time display unit starts at $2,195 for an economy style and $2,545 for an A-frame style, excluding shipping and tax. For more information and to request bulk unit pricing, please visit www.shedgeek.com/cold-spring-enterprises and fill out your information, and someone will be in touch with you as soon as possible. Or simply go to the Shed Geek newsletter and click on the greenhouse picture to fill out your information. Thank you for considering our greenhouse kits. We are excited to work together to bring greenhouse kits to your line of products.
I'll bet you when they started doing it, they were like, oh my gosh, this is working. We're going to keep doing more of it. And I think that's incredible. So again, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think part of the battle in this industry overall is we just get stuck and we aren't willing to take the risks of trying things outside the box. Let's talk a little more about the living spaces. And I love the fact that you call them living spaces.
Sure.
And most of us in the industry refer to them as barndominiums or barndos, and that's fine too. But living spaces, to me, when you said it, I went, oh, it's higher quality, it's high end. And then you brought up the word, we are high end. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about the living spaces and some things that, maybe trends that you're seeing. But I wanted to start with, are there companies cheaper than you?
Almost certainly.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is we get, and especially on the dealer side, when I work directly with dealers, all the time, well, down the street, they're cheaper than us. I don't care. I don't care. Or down the street, they offer one thing that we don't. I don't care. We all find our niche, and we have to own that space. I bet you don't get pushback on being high end. I bet you get, I want to be your customer because you are high end. Was there a certain point that they took the philosophy that we are going to be the high end option and we are going to have living spaces rather than barndominiums? I think it's a play on words, in my opinion. But I mean, just in my opinion, as far as how I view it, I think it's amazing. It's fantastic. Did they start off that way, or did they work themselves into that way? Because I've seen your products. I mean, your buildings are absolutely incredible. They are far beyond what else I see in the market for the most. Did they choose to do that intentionally or work their way into it? Is my question.
I will admit that this does predate my time here. Obviously, like I mentioned, this goes back all the way to the 90s and early 2000s. So quite a bit a ways before my time here. But I do know the owners very well, and I would feel pretty confident in saying that they've always had, a vision for being a very premier class business, not just in their proficiency as builders, but just their relationships and who they are as people. They're both wonderful, wonderful people. And I think that, again, going back to what makes businesses successful is they just have the attitude of, we want to be the best. But it is interesting too, the other angle of your question of did they have a vision for starting off that way intentionally, or um, I would say very much yes to the question of quality of building and product and experience. But as I mentioned before, going back to how early we started as a company and sort of what was and almost in this case what wasn't happening at the time. Barn dominiums weren't really a thing back in the 90s and stuff. Now I'm sure did there exist such a thing as somebody who built an apartment above a barn or an old shop. I'm sure that's gone back
Right.
arguably for centuries, you could say even. But barn dominiums as we know it today, the trend of the last decade or so, um, it was definitely in its infancy. And so I think the vision probably developed in real time a lot of the cases, year by year, trend by trend. And I think that honestly speaks to a bigger piece of who Barn Pros is as a company, as a brand, is because we really got to where we are and continue to get to where we are going even just by listening to our clientele, right? I mean, that is so much how the notion of a living space type model or living space type models as a genre of product line really came to be. And the way we've been able to achieve not just ideas for different model designs, but even optimizing and really making the building process and the functionality very, very efficient is because through repetition, through project after project, year after year, we've just continually listened to, the feedback from the clients that we've received and paid attention to what people were asking for, and just started to notice, as I mentioned, through repetition, the kind of the common threads of, identifying problems that we've seen in the past, and then we can help, future clients, work around or avoid or prepare for, and then just, things that are as detail oriented as the type of, you know, 2x6 versus 2x4 versus, whatever to, help a horse not be able to kick through a door. It's that concept applied all the way from the small details up through, the entire thread of the company, really.
So it almost sounds like the lean method where you're putting something out there and then you're taking the data or the feedback or well, we had a problem here and we didn't hear, and then you're analyzing that and tweaking that information. I think oftentimes companies they forget that. And I love the fact that you said listen to your customer. It that's so critical, and I know you're ingrained in it. I know to you it's normal, and I bet you cannot even imagine that other companies are not this way. But I can assure you that there are a lot of companies that aren't that way, and it isn't even that a company has to be the high end leader. It's just it almost sounds to me like you chose your identity for the company, which is we are a high end company, and we prove it to you with the quality of our products, and you have the processes in place that's huge. Because I heard you allude a couple times saying, making things more efficient. Well, what does that do? That drives up a profit. And why are we all listening to this podcast and in this industry? Because we want to make money, right? Do you is your company one that has standard operating procedures for a lot of the things you do?
I would say so.
Yeah, yeah. And that was going to be my guess. Not even an educated one, just that you're really really good at what you do, and yeah, and mark that. So let me ask you this: I'm a potential customer. Maybe I'm referred from my friend Betty, who just had this beautiful barn built on her 10 acres out in Machias or wherever. What does that process look like to me? Is it you call it, because that's going to be completely different from the shed industry where, hey, here's our sheds, and, you know, yeah, you can put a window over here instead of over there, but it's not the same. So let's talk about that a little bit because I really want an education. What does that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different ways that sort of we think about it. I suppose, generally speaking, people obviously have usually seen our website or our social media presence and are familiar with, our brand, our models, our structures, our buildings. And really, what that process looks like for us now, I would say from our side of that relationship is really wanting to get to know, again, going back to it being such a client-based, or relationship-based business is, yes, we have designed a lot of models for structures over the years because we've done so many builds and seen a lot of similar patterns. But at the end of the day, we still very much want to get to know you and understand what are your needs and wants, right? That's a huge thing that is really one of the biggest places to start. Maybe not the biggest place, but one of the biggest places that we as a company combined with a potential client is just really understanding what are the needs and wants for your structure for your project, right? And it goes back to, is this a place that you're going to live in? Is this just a place for storing your RV and your boat and kind of like a fun hangout space? Or is this going to be, I'm going to be boarding courses here, either just my own or actually running a facility. It's all about the needs and wants of the project in the early stages, and then it'll graduate onto some of more of the fine details of, do you have land yet? If so, where are you building? What are the regulations around that? And obviously, it's a very iterative, very in-depth process. But I would say where it starts is just honestly, just we want to hear from you and understand what you're looking for and figure out how we can be a good fit.
We frequently in the shed and metal building industry get asked, do you do permits? And the answer for me and my team was no. Now, we will guide our customer as much as we can through that process. But at the end of the day, and hey, dealers, if you're out there, manufacturers, and you're doing permitting, I salute you. I think that's wonderful. I just could not wrap my head around. I felt like I would spend 90% of my time on permitting issues. That's going to be a big deal with your structures. Is that something where you walk the customers through that process?
Yes and no. I mean, like you said, we don't offer any, I would say, explicit or official permitting service. However, because we are such a historic company, or we have a history of, over 30 years now, and we've built and shipped north of 2,000 structures all across, North America, basically, right? So we have a lot of experience. And that is something that I think is, along with a premier product, is a huge part of who we are as a brand. Is It's so much more than just, can you build this? How much does it cost? It's, the thing that a sad reality of construction that we've noticed all too much, and we're a huge part of our mission is wanting to change this, is just how stressful and time consuming and, expensive it can be if, I wouldn't say not done properly, because it is a huge project. But it's really hard to know what you don't know if you've never gone through this before, right? So bringing it back to your question of permitting, I think this is actually a larger theme that I'd be happy to touch on a little bit further in some other areas if you like. But with permitting, we don't offer explicit permitting services. However, like I mentioned, because we've done so many of these projects, we know where to help guide you to help empower you and educate you on being able to go successfully complete those, I guess, requirements outside.
I'm going to go out on a ledge here, and I would bet that a lot or most people probably do ask you, do you do permitting? Is that fair? I mean, that at least asking you if you do it. I mean, we even get that in the shed and metal building industry, and it's not, it's that line we have to draw in the sand that we don't, but we're going to help you as much as we can to guide you based on the experience we have. But I'll bet that a lot of people during the process with you ask, is that fair? Is that a fair thing to assume that they do?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. That's something we certainly speak to in our frequently asked questions section.
Yes. Okay, perfect. And so, and that's another thing, you have the procedure in place where, hey, this is a frequently asked question. We have a document that addresses that. I think the reason I wanted to bring that up is, in the shed industry, when someone's buying a small shed and it's 5 or 10,000 thing versus a $500,000 thing, sometimes we still get the same questions. And one could say, well, they have this high-end product. Why aren't they doing this? Well, because that's not your expertise. And just like in the sheds, that's not our expertise. So it's funny how some things overlap, even though it's completely different.
Yes.
Different. At the end of the day, customers are customers. So I'm a customer, and I've decided that I am going to, and I don't know a whole lot about horses. Let's just say that. I did have one when I was 14 down in the Frylands, not too far from where you're located. My first day, that was before the houses were there. First day I rode my horse, it bucked me off and I broke my tailbone. And that was the end of my career with horses. So we're going to pretend like I have some horses. I'm going to order a very high end and very nice equestrian barn from you. And I live in Oregon. I'm in Bend, Oregon. That's a beautiful area.
Oh, it's lovely.
And how do I get my building to me? Like, I've ordered it. You've walked me through your process. We've designed it. I've picked everything. I've got the money because money's never an issue, right? It is always an issue. But how does that building get to me and built on my property?
Yeah. So part of our offering is that we ship all over the lower 48 and to Canada, actually, I should say, but specifically the lower 48 of the United States, and everything, all the material for what's included in our portion of the building package. There's certain elements like, your roofing material, your insulation, and if you're doing a living structure, some of the other, interior components are not something that we supply. But for everything that does come with our kit, we pre-engineer everything for your site specific. So that's part of our offering. And then we build and assemble material and ship it out on trucks right here from our warehouse in Monroe to wherever you're building.
Okay. So now I'm in Bend, Oregon, and the truck has arrived. Now what happens? Who's gonna put it together for me?
Exactly. Yeah. So along with your question of permitting, we do get that one as well as, do you build the structures? And like I mentioned in our origin story, that is very much our roots as being builders. And that is how we came to design the structures. Again, not just for the needs or wants aesthetically from the equestrian side of things, but for the builders, right? We wanted to make a product that was very approachable, very buildable, very structurally integral. And so we don't, because we have scaled up to the point where we're shipping all over North America year after year, we are not the ones building those all across the country every year, right? So similar to the permitting process, we can do our best to help you find a builder as far as, the network that we have having done this across the country for so many years. And there's certainly different hotbeds that we find our products going to, or our structures, I should say, going to more frequently. So through the nature of those, year after year cycles, we have established different relationships and networks of builders in the area. And that's, again, one of those things where we may have recommendations of, we have had clients build. 3 of our clients have used this builder before. We could recommend you reach out to him. We don't have anything that's, an official network or an official referral program at the moment. But similar to the permitting process, we help connect the dots for you when we can. And the other big part that is super helpful for our process is the entirety of the building cycle, and really beyond that, even once it's finished and you get to enjoy your structure for decades to come. But particularly for the sake of the question here, one of the big value adds for our system or our process is you get build support for the entirety of that. So we have builders that have built these structures that work with us in our engineering department here. We have not only our project specialists who have been working with you throughout since the inception of when you first reached out to us and started talking about, the project that you had in mind. And then you also will have a dedicated fulfillment specialist. So once you go through and you've kind of figured out what structure model is going to work for you, you've dialed in your permitting and it looks like everything's going to be a go, and you decide to proceed, that's the point where you'll start working not only with your project specialist, who is sort of your first point of contact, if you will, to help answer your early on questions and again help you complete sort of the earlier stages, but then you'll begin working with what we'll call your fulfillment specialist. So they'll basically carry you through the next phase of all of that coordinating, right? Like they can help connect you with builders if you don't have one already. If you have
Yes.
people in mind and they have questions for us, prior to the structure shipping out, that's something that they can help you, either the fulfillment specialist or specifically our engineering and build support departments. It's a very group centric or group coordinated effort to basically just do as much as we can for you all along the way from start to finish and really even beyond that, as I mentioned. So
What I'm hearing you say without actually saying it, your focus is on the customer experience.
yes,
Even when
absolutely.
you can't do something for them, and gosh, and again, it doesn't matter what the product is, folks that are listening, it comes back to the same thing. I think that so often in a lot of industries, we try to get the customer, we need that lead, and now we've got someone, and now we're trying to sell them, and then bye, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
And I I'm hearing that you're different, like the fulfillment specialist, even the name implies to me that someone's going to be there to take care of me. I just, it is so impressive. I hope, and it won't be this weekend because I've got short time when I'm in Monroe, but I really hope that the next time I'm out that way and I have some time, I would really love to come by and shake your hand in person and just so in a nutshell, going back to the question, you may have someone that you can refer them to because perhaps other customers use them, and you'll refer them to someone, if a contractor, if you can, or the customer can choose their own local contractor, and then that person or that company is going to install the building, and if there's issues along the way, then they could reach out, and there's you're not done just when you drop off the stuff on the truck.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, that's exactly the heart of what we do, is always being able to, always wanting to give as much value and help as we can. And we truly mean that, right? I suppose when I say that we always want to give value, there's different ways that that looks like, right? But really, as I mentioned, and I keep finding myself coming back to through the course of our conversation here, is one of the biggest things that we are very mission driven on these days is just leveraging our experience to help people, right? Because it's a very few select. There's not many people that have done what we've done, I should say, as far as being around for this long, building this many structures, seeing this many projects come to fruition. Talking to this many people. We ship dozens or hundreds of structures a year. We've seen several thousand of these built successfully over the course of our almost 35-year history now. Um, And so there's just so much we've learned along the way, right? And going back to your question of, um, helping connect the dots for people, is we always want to give you some answer that you're going to either have your question fully resolved, or we're going to help guide you in identifying the steps or the resources that you can help we can help you pursue if we aren't able to give you a direct answer on something, right? So finding a builder is a pretty easy example to point to, along with permitting, like you mentioned. Is if it's not something that we can directly um, give an answer to, we usually, or almost certainly always, can help identify the next steps that you should take. Not just what steps to take, but sometimes it's not just about knowing what to do. There's more to it than that. We're gonna help teach you how to do these things and where you can go specifically. If we don't have a builder sort of in our network, if you will, in your area, we know these are the usual resources that we see people find success in finding builders. Or if this is a permitting hang up that we often see, these are the steps that we've noticed and helped people along with that generally lead to their success. So those are the steps that we're going to recommend to you.
Wonderful. It truly is going a step beyond. And again, when we have listeners, and there's a lot of us, it's I hear every day, oh, it's the economy, or it's who's going to be your president or not going to be president. And oftentimes it's not that, folks. It's, there are some things that affect things, but it comes down to the service you provide. And this is living proof that you can have a very high-end, very expensive product. And if you do the right things and have the right processes, you can be very, very successful, probably more successful than they ever dreamed of, which is wonderful. And they're still around and thriving. So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that I would bet you get a lot of referrals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's, what's the easiest, what do? We spend so much time as business people and companies trying to find a customer, and then we really are not treating them the way they should be treated to continue that process. And you guys have honed in, and it is working, and you're doing it, and you led the pack with the Google ads, you led the pack with the website. And I can just imagine, because I was around when websites were first coming out, and I was like, what in tarnation, how's this ever going to help us? And so I bet there was people that were like, you don't need to do that, or you're just wasting your money on that. And look at you now, right? Have you continued throughout the years? Have you seen that they try to be on the cutting edge of things? Because even like your website, and granted, it's a successful company, and if we're talking with a small shed manufacturer versus a company that's got your longevity and success, I get that budgets are different, but the cores come down to the content and aesthetically looking good. Are they still continuing to try to be cutting edge? Are you on Twitter? Is Twitter a good spot, or TikTok? I guess it would be. Are you on, not Twitter necessarily, TikTok? Are you on Instagram, or did you draw the line and say, we're not going there?
Well, I don't believe we're on TikTok or Twitter at the moment, but our Facebook and our Instagram are efforts that we've fed for many years now, as well, along with the website and stuff. So for the visuals, that's probably the best place to come visit us. YouTube is somewhere we're trying to be a little more present, just because we have so many client stories to tell and so many things to show off that people love to see and learn about. So.
Greetings from the Shed Gal. As I delve deeper into the shed and steel building industries, I am thrilled to establish connections with friends who offer amazing products, such as Wendell Hochstetler, the owner of VersaBend Tube Bender. At VersaBend, they thank you for your interest in their tube bender. The VersaBend is designed to bend 2-inch, 2 1/4 inch, and 2 1/2 inch square tubing, as well as 2 by 3 inch rectangular tubing in either 14 or 12 gauge. Powered by a robust 5 horsepower unit, it features 2 adjustable stops for setting your desired degree or pitch. Priced at just $19,500 and shipped from Abbeville, South Carolina, you can secure your VersaBend with a down payment of only $1,500. Contact them today to check availability and get placed on their order list. VersaBend is a family-owned business dedicated to providing an easy-to-operate bender made with off-the-shelf components. A unique feature of their bender is that it offers a full radius bend, unlike the double crushed bends produced by most other machines. Want to see it in action? Visit their website at www.csecarport.supply or give them a call at 864-446-3645.
Do you get a lot of customer testimonials after the fact where you're getting that feedback from them about how the process was or how they felt about the process while it was happening?
Yeah, we do. And it's funny you mention that, because that's one thing that we are trying to, really pour back a lot of our energy into, even as of late, right? Is, as I mentioned, I've personally been with the company for about 5 years now, and that's how I got my start, is being a part of that storytelling process through visual media, right? But we have so many more people that we could highlight, and people are willing and they love it. So our biggest, frankly, the biggest struggle with that regard is the geographical spread, I suppose, of just how far away some of these people are. And it is interesting, just maybe a small anecdote for me that people can laugh at a little bit, is coming from somebody who was a professional photographer for several years, and again, that's sort of how I first got my foot in the door with Barn Pros here, and somewhere I still continue to spend a lot of my effort is because we were building, so fast and furious and growing so much during, the early 2000s and mid 2000s era. We have a ton of photos from that era of things, but it's funny because they don't really hold up these days. The old flip phone cameras are not what the modern
Yeah.
iPhones or professional level gear are. So that's something we've been circling around to the last couple of years and trying to put more effort into showing more of the people's stories as well as the structures, right? So I actually just flew back from the East Coast last week. We went out to Massachusetts to visit a client who built with us in 2017. They built a Denali, which is our flagship living structure. Big, beautiful barn, living space back on the East Coast. So that was really cool. And we got to actually do a pretty cool sit down with them. That was just a chat, an honest conversation about, working with Barn Pros, what they've enjoyed about the structure. Because that's the cool thing, right? Is they've been there for a handful of years now. So while the building process is something that's interesting to talk about, maybe right when folks finish, what's really cool for us is being able to come back years later and still hearing that excitement and that enjoyment and, how they're actually using the structure. Because it's going to be around for so much longer than just the building process in that early stage. So it was really cool to get to sit down with them. And it was one of the first times I believe that we've got a client and builder actually, doing a joint interview together. So I think that was something that was really cool. And we'll be really excited to get that out and be able to share that hopefully in the next couple of weeks as we dive into, editing the photos and video from that recent shoot. But yeah, getting to hear from people, not only the clients, but the builders, and really just show off more of the stories, because it's really all about the people at the end of the day, more than the buildings even.
Absolutely. Hey, say that louder, would you? It's all about the what?
It's all about the people.
Yeah. And that follow up, like I could just see, someone going, well, I don't in the shed industry or metal building, because again, it does. I'm telling you, folks, it doesn't matter what the product is. Your results will be the same as far as referrals and that, no matter what your product is, if your process is the same as what they're doing. And I'm thinking there could be people, I'm not going to go out there and go back to a customer from 3 years ago. They might have a complaint. Well, they might, but why not address it? And why not address it? And how many, I'm just thinking, I bet that customer from way back then is just like, wow, they still care about me. That's really cool. That's really cool. On average, how many buildings a year? Just a roundabout number, nothing specific.
It's interesting to say, just because the last couple of years, during and post COVID has just been such a roller coaster and stuff. But I mean, I would say generally anywhere from 75 to 100 shipments a year is probably what we aim for. We've done, as I think the busiest year we had was somewhere around like 140,
Wow.
I believe. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a big operation. So
Oh, yeah. But I mean, even 75. I mean, that's a lot of buildings and a lot of this for here and that for there, and to be able to keep the stellar reputation amongst the chaos, really. It's not really chaos for you though, because you have the processes in place, but I think so many of us are fighting the chaos on a day-to-day basis. You could not do what you are doing and being so successful at it if you did not have processes in place. And that, folks, that's so critical. It doesn't matter manufacturer. I don't care if you're a hauler, and I love you shed haulers, I'll tell you what, but it's processes for that. It's processes for following up. We see on the shed hauler side, and hey, I'm not knocking anybody. I hauled some sheds up in Washington. In fact, Warren, I had a shed I was hauling on I-5 in Burlington. It fell off the back of my trailer. That was not a good Saturday. But the processes of how many haulers call their customers after they've delivered the building and just say, how is it?
Yeah.
Well, most of them, I'm going to speak for some that I know, they're not going to do that because then it opens up the door of that, well, it's not perfectly level or this or whatever or that, and they don't have time for that. Man, I'm telling you, challenge yourselves, folks. Sometimes you go back and you do the right thing, even if it isn't your fault originally. It will go so far in how customers will tell their, well, something went sideways, but they fixed it and they were so great. And it took a week because they're busy, but they did it. And I just see you guys going the extra mile. I mean, I want to order a building from you and I don't even have property to put it on. So I mean, that you're selling me without even selling me. Do you know the biggest building you've ever done square footage wise? I'm just curious, just a roundabout, because I bet you've done some big stuff.
Oh man, I don't know off the top of my head what the biggest square footage would be. I would say for anybody who's curious on that question though, if you're able to navigate to our website, I know one of the biggest structures we've designed and sold a few of is called the Preakness, and it's like several barns attached to each other with a giant riding arena in the middle. And I mean, all of our structures are pretty big, and that one is massive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting. And going back to like the larger theme that we've talked about here today of, a huge part of what we do, and I really don't want to come across as being overly markety or salesy, but because it truly isn't that. We always just try to stay so tethered to the relationship and helping add value, not just making the sale and shipping another structure, right? And a huge part of our process, like I said, just because we've done this for so long now, is not telling anybody what to do, but knowing what questions to help you ask yourself and what things to help think through, and the flow of thinking through planning a project and stuff, because it is very interesting. Um, just a small side tangent on the subject of the size of the structures, right? I mentioned I was just on the East Coast filming that client interview with someone who has a Denali, and they have probably a pretty medium-sized Denali. It's a 36 by 60, which I think the smallest Denali is 36, and it can go all the way up to like 108 feet long by 36 wide. Like, they are not small. And it was the first time I'd actually stepped foot in one for some amount of time. And I see them on the computer all the time doing things, and I see our trucks being shipped out. But when you actually stand next to one or get to walk through one that's built and it's done, and they are massive buildings and they are beautiful, and it kind of makes you giddy every time you see one. And I've seen a lot of them.
So if you can sum up the six, I don't know that you're gonna be able to do this. So here I'm putting you on the spot. We don't prep for these. Nobody ever knows what Susan the Shed Gal's gonna ask them. So if you can sum up the success of Barn Pros in one or two words, what are those words?
Well, I mean, like I would confess, like I said, I have not been around for the vast majority of this company. But I very much am tethered to all of us here are. Everybody who works at Barn Pros, like I mentioned, frankly, I think for the size of our operation, people might be a little surprised to see I wouldn't say how few people are here, but maybe just for lack of a better phrase, how few people are here, just as far as number of employees go. So everybody that's here really gives it their all and really works, with their heart in it, with each other and for everybody. And I think I would personally use those same words to describe the mission statement behind the company, is doing the right thing for people to not only have the best product, right? And maybe you've picked up on me coming back to that sentiment a lot during this discussion, is because, we do have a very established and very premier product, right? Our structures are beautiful. We're well known across the nation for that because we've been able to build and maintain and grow that reputation for over 30 years.
Yes.
But I will say, with some of the things that Barn Pros is working on, not just continually, but even some specific initiatives that we're really excited about, releasing here soon, is very much a heart we have for community and for people out there. and just wanting to share everything that we've learned and our expertise along our history to help you find better, faster, more joyful success in the projects that you go pursue.
Amazing. I was just thinking, like, just from what I know, the limited amount I know, the only two words that I can think of are customer success. And what I mean by that is the whole way from before they've even contacted you to through the process of them then buying from you or not.
Exactly.
And then installation and then the after. That's what makes the customer success. And if any one of those is missing, and it's missing a lot in a lot of different industries, and that's just, if I had to come up with two words, it's customer success, because of all that you do from start to finish. And your finish is not where a lot of our finish line is. It isn't
Sure.
when you collect the down payment or the payment, right? So I think it's wonderful. I was taking some notes here. I wasn't texting. I was just taking.
Oh,
some
you're totally
notes, 'cause
fine.
I wanted to make sure someone's like, I'm going to write in an email anonymously to the Shed Geek because Susan is texting during an interview. No, I'm not. Taking notes, folks. Taking notes. It's just intriguing to me. So, well, we'll wrap this up, and I have to tell you, I could go on for hours because I'm just so involved in this industry and just so intrigued by companies and the processes that they do. And there's not any one necessarily right way, but boy, I think they're going to be around for a very long time. And of course, we're going to put up the website and the phone number, and maybe drive some business to you that way. Who knows? You might have some people in the industry, reaching out for some consulting advice, and whether you talk to them, that's up to you or not. But
Sure.
I just challenge everybody. If you want a business model that works, that's customer centric, I mean, here it is, right here. And he doesn't look miserable. He looks like a happy guy. Yeah,
Very grateful for where I am.
Well, and you mentioned the family atmosphere, and everybody's very connected at the business, and that tells me that things are working. So I sure appreciate your time, Warren. Do you have any final comments before we go?
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to chat today, and it was wonderful, and I hope people found it interesting.
Wonderful. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to this week's episode of the Shed Geek podcast, which happens to be hosted by me, Susan the Shed Gal, on Magnificent Mondays. Go have a great week, and let's do this again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, this is Mo Lunsford in sunny Union Grove, North Carolina, and we want to say thank you to all the guests and listeners.